Good evening and welcome to our newest episode of And Yet We Believe. Tonight we're going to be talking about the importance of asking, Lord, is it I?
That's right. And thanks for joining. We're glad you are all here. So this topic, of course, comes from the story in the New Testament. It's in Matthew 26, and it's when the Savior is having the Last Supper with his apostles, and he says, one of you is going to betray me. So here it is out of Matthew 26, verses 21 and 22. And as they did eat, he said, Verily I say unto you that one of you shall betray me. And they were exceedingly sorrowful, and began every one of them to say unto him, Lord, is it I? Now, of course, in LDS circles, we also know this because of Elder Uchtdorf's talk. He gave a talk about Lord, is it I? And gave this really great message about how we should all be asking, Lord, is it I? About a variety of things. This isn't about his talk. It's kind of on the same topic. So, sort of the same, sort of different.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to apply it to things that maybe we feel we should be asking it about, or just kind of the general importance of asking it, of being humble enough to realize maybe I have some room for improvement.
Yeah, so one of the things Elder Uchtdorf did talk about was when something is said and somebody goes, it thinks to themselves, I'm glad Brother Brown is here. He really needs to hear this message. Instead of thinking, I should be listening to this message and I should be applying it. But instead thinking, that person really needs this and that person really needs that. Yeah,
which I think that is a really common human reaction to things, to always be able to point to others and to look at others and see their shortcomings, instead of wanting to face your own.
Yeah,
that's hard to recognize. Maybe I'm not great and I have things to change, and no one loves to sit in that zone.
Right. So it seems like an opportune time to say, if you know somebody that needs to hear this message, send them the link. So, okay, we're going to take that principle out of Elder Uchtdorf's talk. Not necessarily, he has kind of a narrow framing in that talk. But here's kind of where I want to go with this. Our inclination, like you just said, as human beings, is to not ask this of ourselves, Lord, is it I? But instead to point fingers at others and say, it's him or it's her, it's that person that needs to hear this message. Now, in the scriptures, and in the story in Matthew 26, it's about the individuals, the apostles. Lord, is it I? Am I the one that's going to betray you? And the finger point, it doesn't say anybody pointed fingers at Judas, so maybe they didn't know or whatever. It kind of seems like they would be suspicious. I don't know. I'm going to leave that alone.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I think a lot of what we're doing right now is doing this finger pointing, but not at individuals, but instead at groups.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a really tough time to be an American in a lot of ways. No matter what side you're on, it's
even just that statement, the fact that there's sides.
Right.
Sorry,
and it's hard to... it's just hard to be in society because there's so many things that we want to blame on other people. And we want to say it's all their fault. It's all, whatever group. Enter in whatever group you're thinking. It's all their fault. They're the ones causing the problems. It could be Republicans versus Democrats. It could be church leadership versus lay member. It could be member versus member. It's all over the place, and it's so much easier to just say it's all that problem, the problem of those people.
Right. So you get politicians and pundits and whoever, TV, social media, it's all full of, hey, it's all that group's fault. And again, sub in any group you want, whether that's a political party or something else.
Yeah. Villainizing and othering people is really quite difficult. I mean, it's easy to do, but it's a really big problem. And I was listening to John A. Powell, who runs the Office for Belonging. It's the Office for Othering and Belonging. He's at, I think, UC Berkeley, I want to say.
Okay.
He has some great books about belonging and othering. But he talks about, and this is maybe a side tangent, but just really quickly, he talks about how anytime we want to belong to a group, and you're trying to get with people that are like you, you're automatically othering other people.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that interesting that we are just trying to belong, and in that groupthink and in the realm of belonging, you're automatically othering.
Because you're drawing a line.
Yeah.
You're drawing a line that has you inside of it.
Right.
That's kind of the important part there.
Right. Isn't
That's
that
really interesting. So when we talk about finger pointing at groups, this is the problem that I have with civility dialogue these days. And this comes up a lot, and it's an important point, and we should be more civil. And you get these politicians, I'm blaming a lot of politicians today.
I mean, that's the world we're in right now,
that's the
right?
arena,
That's
right?
the atmosphere.
Yeah, and they'll say, well, the problem we have is we don't have enough civility, but it's always they don't have enough civility. And nobody's owning that and saying, like, Lord, is it I? Is it me? Is it my political party, my group, my ideological bloc? It's always, we need more civility. And everybody in the United States, or wherever you live in the world, is sitting around going, yeah, everybody agrees, right? We need more civility because we need all those people to be civil. Clearly I am.
Yeah.
But we need everybody else to. And so that's the not asking, Lord, is it I, but instead pointing the finger.
Yeah. So if your Instagram or Facebook feed has been anything like mine, or a social media feed, it has been like mine this week, there's been a lot of this division, right? There's been a lot of picking sides and claiming that you're the good one or that they're the bad one or whatever.
Yeah.
And you know, we don't want to go necessarily into the topics of what caused that, but as kind of an outsider perspective, it has been interesting to watch those two groups. I have purposely tried to not get into fighting online or, you know, getting into the comments section or whatever. And I think, so I've had friends that are very much like, you have to be this one way, and they're on a certain side. And then the other friends are like, if you're not this, then you are a horrible person.
Right.
And I don't think they realize that they're drinking the same Kool-Aid here. Like they are in the same water. They're just on opposing ends of the pool.
Right.
And not like shallow and deep end. They're on like sides of the pool. Right. They're in the same length, the same depth of the pool. But it's hard to see, I think, when you think you are standing up for what is right. You have the truth. You know what is right. You know how to get everybody out of this. And so you're going to beat people down and call them names or, you know, plead your righteous case. But they're both doing it on both sides.
Right. It's all finger pointing and there's no actual owning of the situation. Right.
And I don't think that doing that is the way of Christ. I don't think it is a peacemaker characteristic, a characteristic of a peacemaker. It is just adding to the vitriol.
Right. This is the Savior that taught Samaritans that were hated by the Jews. And it didn't seem to have any taste for those kind of divisions.
Well, and I do want to add, like, it is okay to stand up for what you believe in.
Of course.
Right?
Yes.
We're not saying don't speak up ever. But the way that we do it is going to be so important. And I don't want to tone police anyone because I 100% know that some circumstances call for a more assertive reaction or call to repentance.
Being more vocal,
Right. And so we're not tone policing necessarily. I mean, maybe a tiny bit for some things, but like I think we need to really learn those, first the humility of, is it I?
Sure.
And then we need to learn those communication skills and conversation skills to actually engage people in honest, good debate instead of like, I'm going to prove that, like Matilda says in the book, I'm big, you're little, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm smart, you're stupid. Matilda doesn't say that. Her dad says it. And Trunchbull. But anyway, that's a problem.
Yeah. We've had quite a few people join in the live feed on Instagram. If you've got comments, please do jump in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. I'd like to give a personal example here of the Lord is it I piece. And I am not any better at this than anybody else. And the place this comes out for me the most is in my parenting. And nothing exposes my hypocrisy like being a parent of 4 boys.
Not just hypocrisy, but all of our flaws get to come out.
Absolutely. Because there will be times when I'm, it's kind of that same finger pointing. Clearly, I'm the parent here, but I'll get after one of our boys for doing something, for leaving a mess or behaving a certain way. And almost inevitably, it's exactly the same thing that I do. Mm-hmm. It's the kind of mess I make. It's the sort of thing I do. Never is my hypocrisy greater than when I'm yelling at one of my boys for yelling at their brother.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a projection piece on it. Or for being on their phone too much. I cannot be critical of anybody for being on their phone too much, because I definitely am.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a psychological, it's understood in psychological circles that we do project. We do
100%.
We see the flaws that we struggle with or that we have in ourselves. We see those in other people so easily. Mm-hmm. And we want them to improve so that we can feel like we did something about our own problem. Right? And we don't actually address our own issues.
Which could be addressed or start to be addressed by asking, Lord, is it I?
Yeah.
Am I the problem, or do I also have this problem?
And maybe with the case of kids, where did they learn the behavior?
Where did they learn to be on their phone all the time? I wonder.
Yeah. I mean, not taking away agency. They get to choose, but yeah. There's a good comment here. I wonder how the conversation would shift if people only genuinely ask questions to understand, not to change anyone's mind, but truly gain better understanding. And I totally agree. And I think that is really hard, because when we ask questions, we want to then give answers of why they're wrong, or,
right.
And so to ask a question to shift your understanding is a very humbling thing to do. And that is actually true listening. Valerie Kaur has a part in See No Stranger about that, how that's true listening, to listen, to understand, not to change their mind.
Yeah. And both of us post a lot on Instagram. And one sure sign of a troll is somebody who starts their comment with genuine question. It's never a genuine question.
It's never done in good faith, at least.
Yeah, and then it's always some kind of gotcha kind of thing.
Yeah.
Genuine question. Why are you the way that you are?
Yeah.
Whatever sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk about this in the context of behavioral psychology.
Okay.
Here, because there's observable human behaviors here, and what this is, I chalk this up to what's called fundamental attribution error. Now, fundamental attribution error is probably best described by giving an example. So, you're on the freeway, you're driving along, somebody cuts you off. That person, they cut me off because they're a jerk. They're irresponsible, they're a bad driver. That person's a jerk. But then change the situation. I'm on the freeway and I cut somebody off. When it's me, it's, I'm in a hurry and I didn't see you and I'm so sorry. It was just, the light was coming in behind and I just couldn't see you there. Okay. And so the fundamental attribution error is that we treat our own things as situational. Oh my gosh, I was in a hurry. That's not who I am. That's just the situation. But when we're talking about somebody else, it's always dispositional. That person, it's a label. That person is a jerk. Yeah. And we're not thinking about their situation. We're not thinking about the context. The comment about asking questions is extremely relevant here. And so I think it's fundamental attribution error that causes us to not ask, Lord, is it I? Because we're always able to dismiss our own behavior. Oh, that's just the situation. That's just... the light was shining in weird from the sun and I couldn't see it. No big deal. Problem solved. But other people, man, that person's a jerk. And it's the same thing in political arenas. It's the same thing with groups. We may not be perfect, but we're trying our best. But those people are murderers and idiots and whatever.
Yeah. This comes up in anti-racism education as well. Because, you want to say oh no, I'm not a racist. I have a best friend that's black. You want to make it situational of
what a good example.
No, this isn't really who I am. This is just I just misspoke, or I spoke out of turn, or, whatever. But it's easy to call out somebody else and say, no, that you're racist. That's a racist thing. And so asking, Lord, is it I within anti-racism is hugely important, because we all have prejudices, we all have implicit bias and all of that, and we feed into stereotypes about other people a lot. And so we have to be able to be humble enough to ask, not even like necessarily what racist things did I do today, but asking, like, how am I keeping this system afloat?
Oh yeah.
And I think that's really important with the political conversations that we're talking about. How am I keeping this system afloat? How am I making sure that this division stays here? Even though I'm feigning humility that I want it to be, I want to bring us together, but I'm just feeding into keeping that division very firm.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's a really good example. So I think one thing about asking the question, Lord, is it I, is that it forces us to confront uncomfortable things about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And
no one loves that.
And so this is what Carl Jung calls the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've seen this show up in Richard Rohr's writings, he calls it the shadow self, talks about doing shadow work.
Yeah.
And so when we ask that question, Lord, is it I, we're confronting that shadow. It's the shadow is the parts of our personality that we've repressed or hidden or even remain unconscious of. And Jung calls it everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. So this is the deep, dark things that we don't talk about at parties about ourselves. Richard Rohr says, invariably when something upsets you and you have a strong emotional reaction out of proportion to the moment, your shadow self has just been exposed.
Yeah. And other people can see your shadow. It's easy for other people to see your shadow, and you're trying to mask it and hide it from other people, but they can see through. Like we can kind of tell when a person is arrogant or, looks down on people or, whatever is like abusive, or, we can kind of see through that. But that person is doing everything in their power to hide it and make sure it doesn't come across to society. Right.
And can you think of a scriptural tie-in for, I can see all these flaws in other people, but I can't see the one in myself? I'll quote Richard Rohr. I mean, we could just go to the scriptures, but he says, Jesus seems to precede Carl Jung and modern depth psychology by 2,000 years when he says, why do you observe the splinter in your brother's eye and never notice the plank in your own?
Yeah.
That's the concept here. So the shadow self is a part of us. That's what gets exposed in a really positive way when we ask that question, Lord, is it I? And, it's this concept of if we want to know fully, then we need to be fully known. And so when Richard Rohr talks about doing shadow work, he's talking about that humility to really get in there and understand ourselves fully. He says, I thought this was wild. He says, I have prayed for years for one good humiliation a day, and then I must watch my reaction to it. I have no other way of spotting both my denied shadow self and my idealized persona.
Yeah, I love that. And I've heard Richard talk with Paul Swanson and Mike Petro on Everything Belongs. They've been talking about that. They always bring up, like, thanks for helping us see or have our one humility today. And the way that they are experiencing that one humility is to laugh at themselves for doing something.
Oh, that's so good.
Isn't that great? Because it's not like, oh my gosh, I'm horrible. I'm seeing my one flaw today, or I'm being humiliated one time today and it was so embarrassing and I hate it. No, it's easier than that, and it's just recognizing, oh gosh, I totally messed up there.
Right.
That was a mistake. And I think teaching that humility at a young age so that kids don't internalize that, the thought that they may be a bad person or something, that could be such a healthy way forward.
That really is. I do not pray to be humiliated every day.
But I would pray to laugh at myself every day.
I saw something online where somebody was saying when they do something dumb or humiliating or embarrassing, they got in this groove where after they do this dumb thing, they go, and scene.
Yeah.
and just wrap it
Take
up.
a bow.
And yeah, exactly. And move on. And I've loved that since I saw it, because that's such a healthy response to something like that, instead of getting angry or upset.
Yeah.
Now, here's what Richard Rohr has to say about that humility and that humiliation. I thought this was really interesting. He says, just know that it is the false self that is sad and humbled by shadow work, because its game is over. Mm-hmm. The true self, hidden with Christ in God, is incapable of being humiliated. It only grows from such insight. And man, it's beautiful. That's so mature, you know?
Yeah.
When I get humbled by something, I get humiliated.
Yeah. Well, and it's easy to just become depressed by it when you just focus on the bad, but you're not having the growth come from it.
Right.
When you're not noticing or acknowledging the growth. And I think that there's a lot of scriptures that could apply to this, and a lot of examples from scripture where people are like, you've got, is it Aaron that doesn't speak well, or Moses doesn't speak well, so Aaron comes to speak for him. There's somebody in the scriptures that is that way as well. In the Book of Mormon, and I'm blanking on who it is right now, but there's lots of examples of people that struggle and have weaknesses, and there's the scripture of showing us our weakness so that it can become a strength
from either.
But I think, as we've said often on this podcast, that we don't focus enough on those growing moments. We just want to tie everything up with a pretty bow and show the end result of, look how great I am. Yes. Look how great this story is.
That's our norm for talks and lessons in church.
Yeah, but I love seeing the struggle and seeing the messiness of humanity.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, because I can feel like, whew, okay, I do fit in here. I am like everybody else, and we all make mistakes.
Yeah, I love that. Now, you could take this topic and you could go pretty negative with it, because the Lord is it I question is about exposing the shadow self. That can be difficult, but it's not about saying, like, I think we're all worse than we thought. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not the point here. But I do think asking, Lord, is it I, is an act of courage. I think it requires faith. I think it requires humility. I think it requires a certain spiritual maturity, and us saying that we want to be part of the solution and not unknowingly continue to be a part of the problem.
Yeah.
So this, to me, actually, this kind of landed a ship for me. I think this is meekness.
There it is.
Yeah, it took me 40-something years to figure out what meekness is, because I heard, like, it's to be teachable and this sort of thing, but I think it's kind of that combination of the humility to say, I might have been part of the problem, but now I'm going to switch around and try to be part of the solution.
Yeah. So we talked about this a little bit earlier today, and maybe you want to bring it up later, but I think this is a good place for it. But I think it's really interesting in this story in the scriptures with the 12 apostles, how they hear of something bad that's going to happen, and they're like, ooh, is it me? Did I do that? Like, am I the one that's going to mess up here? But then there's the part in Matthew 25. Yeah, Matthew 25, is that it? No.
It's in, Matthew 25.
Where they're saying, or Jesus is teaching, I was hungered and you took me in, and I was thirsty and you gave me drink, and all of that. And they're like, yes, when did we do that? I know I did that. When did I do that? And
it's not, did we do that? It's not, Lord, is it I? It's, I did that.
That must have been me. I did that. Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting difference, that we want to take credit for the good stuff that happened, and no one wants to own up to the hard stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I even think it's interesting that, in the story, all 12 of them asked, Lord, is it I? And none of them said, well, I know it's not me.
Yeah. Lord, is it Judas?
Right.
No one asked that.
Right. And I think asking that question is a willingness to not know yourself completely, and a willingness to learn things about yourself. Certainty is the knowing. I know it's not me. I'm certain on that. And we've talked about certainty on this podcast before. We did a whole episode on it. Lord, is it I? Is not knowing. And so when Judas asked, Lord, is it I? it might have been sincere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was sincere for at least the other 11. Peter asked, Lord, is it I? And then he denied Christ 3 times, like later that night.
Yeah.
And so, like, when they asked, Lord, is it I? They may have actually been asking and trying to learn something about themselves,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is I've never read this deeply into this story
Yeah.
before. There's really a lot there.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe in that moment, I wonder if they all recognized they were capable of doing something.
Oh my gosh.
So it's not just like, because they're not talking about the past. He's saying that one of you will do this tonight.
Yes. Uh-huh.
It's not something that they, they knew they had messed up in the past, and he's like, okay, who did it? Own up.
Mm-hmm.
But he's setting, he's saying something about the future, and they're like, oof.
He doesn't even put a time on it, actually. In Matthew 26, he just says, verily I say unto you that one of you shall betray me.
Yeah.
And so they may have been thinking out the next, 20 years or whatever. We know they didn't have a clear picture of the crucifixion at that point.
Right.
And then that was actually going to happen. And so they might have been thinking about, what's going to happen in the next few years?
Yeah.
Am I gonna go a different route here?
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. And I think here's kind of maybe where I want to end with this.
Okay.
Is I think this is what Bonhoeffer talks about. This is Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Lutheran, German, Christian thinker. He's the guy who participated in a plot to assassinate Hitler and then lost his life to the Nazis because of that. But he talks about this concept of cheap grace and costly grace. And this is a deeply influential concept that he wrote about in his book, The Cost of Discipleship. And he talks about cheap grace. And this is grace, or this is religion, that only comforts.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have comfort without conviction. You can be forgiven without having to actually change your life. You can get consolation just kind of for free. This is kind of a pat on the head religion concept. And I think we do that a lot.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah. It's religion that just
sign me up.
You don't have to do anything and you're going to feel good. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
That's cheap grace. That's what he called it. And that's such a dirty, derogatory sounding term, cheap grace. But then he talks about costly grace, and costly grace is what is transformational in us. And that requires total surrender.
Yeah.
That requires us to change. That requires us to ask, Lord, is it I? Here's what he says. Bonhoeffer says, costly grace is the treasure hidden in the field. For the sake of it, a man will go and sell all that he has. It is the pearl of great price to buy which the merchant will sell all his goods. It is the kingly rule of Christ, for whose sake a man will pluck out the eye which causes him to stumble. It is the call of Jesus Christ at which the disciple leaves his nets and follows him. And that's an entirely different thing than a religion that pats you on the head and says everything's going to be okay. This is a religion that asks you to leave everything behind and follow Christ.
Yeah.
And in the context of what we're talking about today, it's what causes you to leave behind the facade that each of us puts on and ask, Lord, is it I? And whatever the topic is, whatever the lesson is or the talk is in church, whatever it is we're seeing in the scriptures, when Jesus says, leave your nets and follow me, we're asking ourselves, have I done that?
Yeah,
and am I willing to actually do that?
Yeah. It reminds me of the famous quote that says, religion is not only, religion comforts the afflicted and afflicts the comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so, comforting the afflicted is wonderful, and that's important. And I'm not trying to say that's a cheap grace to comfort people.
Sure, of course not.
But afflicting the comfortable, that's maybe what this is talking about.
Right.
It's trying to get people to have some self-acknowledgement of what's going on in their lives and what they need to improve on, because we know we all need to improve. No one is perfect. We haven't been twinkled yet. We're not up in heaven, so we've still got things to work on.
Right.
And so, I think that we need to I think it's healthy to realize that there is room for improvement and that we can be change makers in our own lives and in society. And that's a good thing. It's not, woe is me, I'm a sinner, but it's like, wow, I've got room to improve. I've got Jesus by my side. What can I do with all of this together?
Yeah. I think if we're okay with cheap grace, if we're okay with just a pat on the head, then we can keep finger pointing, and we can keep making it everybody else's problem and everybody else's fault. But if we want to do the shadow work that Richard Rohr talks about, if we want to have the transformational experience of following Jesus Christ, that means asking, Lord, is it I?
Yeah. Gosh.
Okay.
Yeah, that is really good. And I feel called to ask that a little more often, just to be aware of what I'm doing. And especially in such a tense time in society right now, I do not want to be feeding into the vitriol and the hate and just the noise that's happening right now. I heard, I saw a post from Casey McFarland from Pioneering Paradox. Yeah. And he said, somebody had asked him why he hadn't responded to the events of the week. And he said, I'm working on it. I'm thinking about stuff. And he referenced the Center for Action and Contemplation. And he said, they're asking us to act, but also to contemplate. And that "and" is really important. And if we are just reactionary and only just talking and being loud, we're not taking the time to quietly ask, is it I? And what do I need to do to positively move these things forward, this conversation forward? So.
Maybe that's the best, homework assignment for the week is before you push send, before any of us pushes send on your post, on a social media post, ask, am I part of the problem? Lord, is it I?
Yeah.
And then maybe reevaluate what it is we're going to post.
Yep. All right. Thanks for joining us. We're so glad you all came.
And we will see you next time.
See ya.